This is Erik Paulsen. Have you met him, Bill?
Not yet.
He's a handsome fellow. Whoa, look. Yeah. So then she...
Never can't do it all. No.
They're working? Okay. Well, first of all, let me just thank everyone for taking the time to come out tonight. I thought what I'd do is just I'll open up a little bit and talk a little bit about what some of the major issues that have been discussed in Congress of recent, of course. Give a little update, if you will, from that perspective. Run through just a couple quick slides. I think there's like 4 or 5. And then give you an update on some personal legislation that I've been working on with some other co-authors. Some of the names you'll be familiar with, some you won't, which is kind of neat stuff. And then open up for some questions. And I know we want to get going because I think we got an hour here before the school closes. And we're going to stick around. We can go out here afterwards, of course. And as always, we've got several staff here that are here to help individuals, because we always have people that have an individual situation with, you know, a late Social Security check or a Medicare issue or even a foreclosure issue, where sometimes we are able to actually help with casework and make a difference on that front. So just please keep in mind that you can absolutely grab a staff person. And there's Kelly and Mark and Dan. I see we've got a couple of interns that are here today as well. So I appreciate you coming out on Monday night, on a summer night. And you could be doing better things, believe me. But I think it's really important to engage folks in the public about what's been going on in Congress. And I can tell you what some of my top concerns personally have been, certainly, and that's primarily centered around spending and debt and kind of getting the economy going in terms of job creation. So I want to just show a couple of quick slides. And I think if Dan's going to maybe just go on to the next one real quick. You know, when I think of the future, I literally sort of think of my 4 daughters, Cassie, Brianna, Taylor, and Liesl. And I worry about their future from the perspective of making sure they've got the same opportunities and choices that past and previous generations have had. And I think one of the biggest challenges that is facing our country, and I think we are at a crossroads right now, given what took place in Greece not long ago, and you can see on the chart here, about 2027 or so, the United States debt load will approach that of Greece. And so this is sort of the budget trajectory that we are on right now. And actually, we will double the budget in 5 years and triple it in 10 years under the current budget that's going forward right now. And so this is kind of the long-term debt outlook. We just, unfortunately, hit the $13 trillion debt mark in terms of what we owe. So everyone in this room would owe approximately $42,000 as your share of the national debt, which is a huge amount of money, actually. And the challenge is to figure out how to pay for that and making sure we are competitive vis-a-vis other countries around the world. And we can go on to the next slide. This slide really represents the interest that we're paying on the national debt. And actually, this is a little startling too, because in just 3.5 years, actually about 3 years, we will be paying about $1 billion a day just to pay the interest on the national debt, which is a significant amount of money. So last year we had our very first $1 trillion budget deficit. This year we'll have a second $1 trillion budget deficit. It's about $1.4, $1.5 trillion this year. And this year also, for the first time since 1974, the first time in modern history, the congressional leadership has decided not to bring forward a budget blueprint resolution. Now you can always say, well, Congress doesn't follow their budget blueprint, or they don't follow their resolution anyway. I would say they should at least have a roadmap for figuring out how you're going to map out spending and making sure you're having prioritizing decisions, I guess, more or less. And, you know, Families, individuals, small businesses, and a tough economy always have to figure that out, and they're doing that more than ever over the last 2 years, especially as the economy has been going through some real challenges. And government is not doing that. And so this will be the very first time since 1974 that there will not be a blueprint passed by Congress in terms of having a roadmap. And many are figuring, in fact, the congressional leadership acknowledges that they're probably going to wait until after the election and do it in a lame duck session. I think that's a mistake, and there's some other issues we can talk about that are going to drive those spending decisions immediately come January of 2011. But this does really paint a stark picture, I think, of where some of the challenges are. If you don't have a budget blueprint or you don't have a budget to follow, how are you going to hope to have any sort of sense of fiscal discipline? And I say that as someone who's very critical of Republicans in the past, that I didn't think followed their budget blueprint very closely, actually. Next slide. This is actually just a quick picture. I won't spend a lot of time in this, but what is almost as troublesome to the last slide is that the amount of debt that our nation now faces of who holds the debt. And so if you look back to 1970, 5% of the holdings of who owned our national debt was outside of the United States. 1990 it was creeping up to 19%, and actually now it's in 2010, 8.4 trillion, so it's about 47% actually of all the national debt, which means countries like China, Japan, and others, large holders of our debt, may not always have our best interests at heart, obviously, and it puts them in a position where if they decide to sell off U.S. treasuries, that is going to put the United States in a precarious situation in terms of our economy itself. So there's just the other national security interest of who owns our debt and how that's handled. Okay, next slide. Just real quick, I'm going to touch real quick because I get asked so many questions still about health care and the health care law. And you know, I know there's probably folks in this room that like some components of the bill because this wasn't a slam dunk either way. But I will say this, is I didn't support the bill, and I still hear about this from a lot of people. And it's been acknowledged recently by the Congressional Budget Office and others that have looked at the actual bill itself. It's actually going to increase costs. And you know, the bill, that's probably an acknowledgement by the authors of the bill that there's a realization that the bill was never designed to keep costs low, and it was designed to expand access. And so that's going to be one of the biggest challenges going forward too, because you've got over $1 trillion health care bill, which is very, very expensive. You know, there's cuts to Medicare, there's some particularly strong hits on small business that are going to be very onerous, and I'll give you one provision in particular, because it's a 50 employee level where there's certain requirements and mandates that get kicked in. And if you hit that 50 employee level, certain things change that make it either more of an incentive or disincentive to grow your company. And I talked to one small business owner who said, you know, I've got 56 employees, and every way that I look at that, or look at the bill, or have the lawyers look at the bill, it's more advantageous for me to lay off 6 people. And that just sends the wrong message to job creators about trying to grow your company, be entrepreneurial, et cetera, et cetera. So the IRS is also going to have the ability now to hire up to about 16,500 auditors, because they will now be put in charge of determining whether companies are providing what is deemed as adequate health care. There's a lot of new boards, and the next chart will kind of show this crazy chart that's out there. And I think one of the key components that's missing from the bill that would have helped control costs would have been liability reform, medical liability reform. Now that's not a silver bullet that would have solved every problem, but it is a component I think that should be included. Now there were some good provisions to the bill that I like keeping younger people on their parents' policies if they choose to purchase that insurance. I'm an author of a bill that does that, but it's, you know, a 40 or 50-page version of a bill that makes progress on health care, rather than a 2,700-page bill. And covering pre-existing conditions is important as well. And I supported a version that covered the pre-existing conditions, even though some insurance companies don't like that. So I really think that Congress missed the mark on capitalizing the cost, on fixing the cost drivers in the healthcare system. And so this is not going to go away. I mean, this issue is not going to go away. It's going to continue to be an issue in the years ahead. And in particular, it's really going to drive up the costs potentially for some small medical device companies here that are in the Twin Cities. And a lot of them are in the 3rd District, ironically, not too far from here. And so it's not just the Medtronics and the Boston Scientifics, but there's like $20 billion of a new tax hit that is going to really penalize a lot of these smaller companies and their research and development that they put in the new life-saving technologies as they bring products to market. And these are some really cool companies, because I visit one almost every week when I'm back in the district, and you wouldn't even know the names of many of them. Some have 3 employees, some have 10. Most of them are not even yet profitable and haven't been around that long at all. But they are working their tails off to come up with the next life-saving technology, and they actually employ people that get paid much higher average wages. They're not, because they're very high-skilled workers, for instance. I mean, this is a Minnesota success story. It's an American success story. And as the co-chair of the Medical Technology Caucus, I'm just really trying to bring awareness and attention to this issue, not only on the tax side of the equation, but on the regulatory side of the equation, because many of these companies are also frustrated with the FDA approval process and not having a management situation that's been put in place that allows device approvals to go forward as they have in the past. So now we are seeing more investment in R&D in Europe, for instance, and those are going to be jobs we're going to lose here. And that's one of the best exporting job markets we've had, or exporting products we've had here out of Minnesota and out of the United States, have been medical devices. The next slide, real quick, and that's the last slide, I think. And kind of laugh at this. I mean, this is the new healthcare chart. It was just released last week by the Joint Economic Committee. So this was just released last week by the Joint Economic Committee. You know, on this chart, everything in color that you see in color represents something that was new that was added by the healthcare law, by the 2,700 pages. Everything in white or in cream was essentially existing previously. The Secretary of Human Services was there before. We'll have expanded powers, obviously. There's something like 68 new grant programs, 29 demonstration projects, 47 new agencies. Everything in color in green represents a new tax or fee that impacts a different constituency. Everything in yellow actually represents a specific mandate on the yellow hexagons in particular. And the colors aren't real great actually because we're not on a white screen, but I think we have copies of the chart that are available outside. And everything, if you actually got a computer image of this, and I think we've got it up on our website now, but there is a line that identifies the connecting point, and inside, embedded in each line, is a documented line or page that references the bill or the subsection of where it was created. So it's all been documented. It took like 6 weeks, I think, to put together by the Joint Economic Committee, and they just released that last week. So there's a lot of new reporting requirements, et cetera, and there's going to be a lot of open-ended questions, I think, as the bill gets implemented over the next few years, which is why I want to raise that, because there are a lot of concerns I hear from the small business community in particular that come to talk about their rising healthcare costs, and they're very frustrated because this bill is not going to address their situation. And so I think we're going to continue to unfortunately, have to tackle the cost issue down the road. And then the next slide. Well, this is it. So we'll open it up to questions, but before I do that, I talked a little bit about the medical technology side that I'm focusing on as the co-chair of the Medical Technology Caucus. And I really enjoy that because it's neat stuff. It's innovation. There's really cool stuff happening here in Minnesota. And one thing that's interesting too is that I had a little roundtable that took place just a couple of weeks ago. I held it with Senator Amy Klobuchar, and we had 65 companies. These are mostly the smaller companies that came and attended that talked about that FDA process and new regulations that are going to be put in place. So, I mean, the bottom line is to solve some of these issues, it's going to take a lot of bipartisan support. It's going to take a lot of bicameral support, and I'm going to keep working on that medtech issue in particular. And the other issue, I just introduced a new bill last week. We did a little press conference on it that I did with Senator John Kerry in the Senate, but it basically is this new text-to-tip legislation that allows cell phone users to text in tips anonymously to law enforcement. In Edina, for instance, Minneapolis schools, and some other cities around the country, Boston in particular, where Senator Kerry's from, they've been implementing allowing law enforcement to use that anonymous connecting point to turn in, offer tips, I guess, to solve law enforcement crimes. So those are just some things that I've been working on the side that don't get a lot of attention in the news or the media, but they're actually meaningful, they're bipartisan, and they, from my standpoint, they kind of move in the direction of being solution-oriented, forward-thinking, and getting things done. So that's kind of the bottom line for me, and I just really want to thank all of you, again, for taking the time to come, and I want you to know, if you ever have a question, don't hesitate to call. The folks come by and visit the office quite often, regular meetings. I'm out in the district all the time. I've been to 65 schools with the goal of trying to get to every school, elementary school for sure, before my term ends. And I think we've had 130 now individual small business or business interactions with employees and their companies and tours, which has been very great. We've had dozens of roundtables. So for me, I'm just soaking it all in like a sponge because I can learn something all the time. I don't have all the answers, but I am absolutely a good listener. And that's what I wanted to be here tonight, is to hear from you directly. So with that, just raise your hand. We won't make you get up in the aisle. Raise your hand. And these guys, I think, have a mic if they're working like this.
Yeah, we'll start down front and work our way back. There's two mics.
Congressman Mike Altieri from Eden Prairie. I'm the father of 3 children, one through college, one getting ready to start college. And I'm really worried about the potential tax increases that may happen at the end of the year. You know, I work for a small company, and you were just talking about some of these med tech companies. They're my customers. All right, we're a company of 20 individuals who work together to you know, try and make Minnesota a better place to live. And you know, these tax increases are really going to hit me hard. You know, I'm you know, trying to put a child through college. I got another one in 2 years. I'm trying to do the right thing, and it seems like my government is saying, those of you that do the right things, guess what? Too bad. And it's frustrating. And my question basically is, you know, I know you're in the minority, and it's tough to, you know, push things through. All right, it's tough to get them out of you know, committee. But what can we do? What can we do to alleviate this issue? I mean, of people that have done the right thing their entire life. I served in the military. I've done everything that my parents told me was what was right. And now I feel I'm being punished by my own country because of it. It's frustrating, sir. It really is.
Well, and I should just relate that I've actually heard similar concerns from other small business owners and folks that work at them that I've had the chance to visit with. And what he's referring to is actually at the end of this year, at the beginning of 2011, there are tax cuts that will expire. So in essence, there's a pretty large tax increase. It's like $3.8 trillion, I think is the dollar amount, that goes into effect at the end of 2010. Now that covers the child tax credit, which will get cut in half. It's the marriage penalty, which will get reimposed. So if you're married and both folks are working, there's going to be a penalty that will be imposed. Every tax bracket actually will increase. Every bracket will increase. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It doesn't make any difference. The lowest bracket from 10% will go to 15%. The dividends tax goes up. Capital gains tax goes up. I mean, you know, nearly every economist would tell you don't raise taxes in a recession. And so I'm a little surprised, to be honest, that there has not been a conversation in Congress. The president's made some comments about extending some tax cuts and not others. There's been no legislation moved forward. That's also speculated that that may have to wait until after the election. I guess from my standpoint, it is wrong to wait because many of these small businesses talk about the uncertainty equation. And they want to be able to invest in their employees. They want to be able to make decisions, but now they're holding on to what cash they may have, knowing that they recently may have laid someone off. They've gone through some challenging situations. They don't want to do that again. So they're giving some more hours to some of their current employees, for instance, but they're not going to hire someone else and then have to lay them off again. So it's the uncertainty on some energy legislation that's been floating out there. The health care bill certainly creates some other uncertainty, and now the tax provisions and the budget provisions dramatically could shift the landscape and penalize entrepreneurs. And you know, my grandfather owned a small manufacturing company in Plymouth. He was always being lured to South Dakota and from a competitive standpoint. And now you're not competing against neighboring states like South Dakota, Iowa. Now you are competing against everyone else in the world. And it is so easy to move capital at the click of a mouse. And that's why you're seeing countries like Ireland, for instance, or others that have lowered their corporate rates or, you know, to be more business savvy or competitive. And so that's just the reality of the situation. So I think it's a mistake not to address it. I don't want to see them, the tax increases go into effect. And you know, in terms of being in the minority, it's tough. I mean, it's really tough because I do whatever I can to build relationships, to get things done. I've actually been able to pass 2 bills. I've been able to pass numerous amendments. And you're only able to do that through building relationships. And the good news is, among the freshman class in particular, I would say there's a lot of freshmen that speak that same language, and particularly in the area of small business. The challenge is getting them to challenge their leadership a little bit. And that's where I think the optimism and the hope has to come for the future. Because Speaker Pelosi has no interest in extending, you know, the tax cuts, or she's going to let them expire.
My name is Grace McGarvey, and I'm from Plymouth. And your 3 charts that show the debt and the interest, those are projected as if nothing will change. And I was wondering what those charts would look like if we reinstituted the taxes we had during the Reagan administration. I've always thought of taxes as the price I pay for living in a civilized society. I've never looked at my taxes as punishment. The taxes gave me an education. It gave me my streets and bridges and roads and my police department, my fire department. And to hear people talk about taxes as if it's some terrible thing We need to increase our taxes so we don't have this terrible burden of interest and debt that you showed. And if we reinstituted the taxes we had during the Reagan administration, that would be wiped out and be completely different. I'd like to hear your reaction to that.
Yeah. Well, and this actually goes back to some of the comments that were just mentioned earlier. And, you know, from my perspective, I want to make sure we don't penalize success. And, you know, I want to do whatever I can to help entrepreneurs, innovators, dreamers, and those that have really built the company in the Reagan decade, if you will. I mean, that's when we saw one of the largest economic growth expansions ever in the history of the country. And I want to see that happen. Now, we're not seeing the return right now with unemployment being at about 10%. Now, of course, in Minnesota it's better. It's about 6.8%. It's been a little bit better, so we're pretty good. But nationally, I mean, we're still struggling. And, you know, they're saying that we may be in this unemployment level for about another year or longer. I mean, that's a long time for people that are affected with unemployment. I would rather help the small business sector. And, you know, larger companies, you know, they make adjustments, you know, Target, Best Buy, others. Many might lay off their employees. A lot of those folks go back to school, they get retrained to do something else. Or they want to start their own idea. They want to go into the garage, they want to start their own idea to become the next Best Buy or become the next Medtronic. And I think that's where most of the help has to go. I mean, keep in mind, right now, the top 1% of all taxpayers pay about 40% of all income taxes. So, I mean, it's not like they're not paying. I mean, it's a huge dollar amount. And so you have to be able to strike a balance. The biggest challenge, I think, is reining in the spending. And I think if you look at sort of with spending increasing at double digits, and adding to the debt and the deficit, that's why you're going to see the budget going up the way it's going. That debate is going to go on because there are some that are certainly advocating for taxes. In fact, there are many now that are speculating and are saying we should have a value-added European-style national sales tax. You know, there's talk of that now, so that's a possibility as well that could be forward. I'm not a fan of that.
Chris Bremer at Living Edina. In June, you voted against the campaign finance disclosure requirements bill, and of course we're seeing a lot of controversy about that now. And I'm wondering what kind of campaign finance disclosure bill you would be willing to co-sponsor that you think would pass through both houses.
Yeah. It's a good question. A lot of people aren't even aware of this, but there is a campaign finance bill that was brought forward shortly after the Supreme Court decision, you know, ruled that the existing laws were unconstitutional from a free speech standpoint. And so the response was by the two leaders, you know, of course, the Democrat in the Senate, the Democrat in the House are the two leaders of their respective campaign caucuses. And so they're kind of trying to drive legislation that might favor them. That's kind of the way I look at that a little bit. And so the bill went through, and they did special favors. They did a special favor for the NRA. So the NRA is not covered under the bill. They did a special favor for someone else. I can't remember who it was. It might have been the Sierra Club. But there's a couple of organizations where they knew they wouldn't get support to pass it unless they basically, you know, free speech for someone should be free speech for everybody. And so, I mean, you got to be fair and equal across the board. So I'm willing to look at anything for sure if there are other proposals. Right now, it sounds like they're trying to still, you know, move the initiative that passed the House. This has passed the House, even though I didn't support it, and try and see if they can, you know, move some effort in the Senate. And I think it may have stalled out, but they may try and do something again in September in the Senate.
Eric, could you clarify that? You voted against it in order to, because you felt the NRA should be forced to disclose their campaign contributions?
Why?
You're saying it was because of the NRA?
Well, that's one of the flaws in the bill, that there was a certain, basically they did little buy-offs, so this is backroom deals, you know,
So
they got certain groups to buy them off, so they got carved out, if you will. And so, I mean, that's not really fair, right? I mean, from that perspective.
Eric, you felt the NRA was being protected by the bill, and you thought they should not be protected?
I think that they should be treated like every other organization.
So other contributions should be.
If that makes sense. Yeah, because they're carved out right now. Yeah. And the other issue, I mean, you know, there's other issue too where unions should be treated equally, et cetera. And so I think there's a dollar amount for disclosure that's at about $600, for instance, which is the average level of like union dues that people contribute. So they wanted to make sure that, you know, those folks would be carved out from contributing. So.
Thank you. My name is Tom White, and I live here in Edina. And Eric, I had a letter printed in the Sun in response to your last mailer, and I think one of the words I used was deceitful. I love the fact that you say that you're trying to reduce the debt. but it's impossible for me to know how you can talk about debt and put charts on there when 50% of the money we're spending on our discretionary budget goes to the military. That $1 trillion will go to the military this year, and it would cost us $1 trillion to give health care to everyone for 10 years. And you talk about the elephant in the living room. You voted for every war fund that they put out. You've tried to defend it. $750 million a day is going into Afghanistan, and with the current disclosures, it's going down a mousetrap. And I'd love you to try to defend how you can ignore 50% of the military budget for the causes that we're finding are so unbelievable, and not mention it, more importantly, on your chart.
Sure. Well, the charts just, of course, demonstrate the congregation of all our students. So let me just mention is that I have not voted, for every military program. In fact, I voted to eliminate or not support the new fighter program or the twin engine. So if there's waste and fraud anywhere, I won't support it. And so, or what I think is duplicative or not necessary. So I'm not afraid to look at the military budgets either.
Member Paulsen, thank you for representing me in D.C. It's good to see you here. My name is Paul Thompson. I live in Edina, Morningside. And my question, no surprise, is about the climate. Last year, the House passed very closely climate legislation, and the Senate has been struggling with trying to figure out what to do, and now they've pretty much shelved the conversation until maybe after the election. Given that 2010 is the warmest year on record, and we're losing our ice cap, and there's been tremendous rainfalls and climate upheavals around the country and around the world, I'm wondering what we can do to form a bipartisan commitment in the Senate and in Congress to move this ahead. And also, where do you stand on putting a tax on carbon so that we can have something like a fee and dividend where there's a tax on carbon? I was in Copenhagen. Gasoline costs $7.50 in Copenhagen. People ride the train, they ride their bikes. It's the smart thing to do. What can we do in this country to move towards that kind of a society?
Well, first of all, I compliment Paul, because Paul and I have engaged in this dialogue for a while. He's real passionate about this, and I met with him a couple of years ago, and it's been ongoing over the last couple of years. And of course, the legislation is not without controversy, certainly, and obviously that's why it hasn't even passed, even though one party controls everything. It's still controversial because they can pass it if they want, and so it's really been hung up primarily around the centerpieces of the costs, right? And you talk about raising gas prices to $6 a gallon and the impact of what that might do in the economy, of course, biking, et cetera. But from my standpoint, given from where we need to go with economic growth, and our growth has been real anemic, I just really worry about imposing those types of costs. I mean, there's been anywhere between $1,700 average increase in family expenses, business expenses, it's just some other more larger estimates, and I'm not sure exactly what's the most accurate, but there's no doubt that, the bill is designed to raise energy costs, fossil fuels. I think what we need to do to bring bipartisan support, I'll give you an example. I mean, Tim Walz and I, we penned a piece not too long ago in the Star Tribune to highlight nuclear energy. And nuclear energy in Europe, it's counted as green energy. I mean, that's one way of controlling greenhouse gases, and I think it's something we should be looking at. It's part of our making sure we've got an appropriate base load here, and if we're not talking about it now, we won't be talking about it to develop it in a few years, unfortunately. In countries like France, of course, have close to 80% of their electricity provided by nuclear energy, and it's something the United States should be doing. But we have to get into the pipeline, because you have to educate people, you have to have basically you have to have nuclear technicians, et cetera. And there are new technologies right now. But I think there is hope for bipartisanship on developing some of those alternative fuels. And I'm doing some other work with Colin Peterson, who's a Democrat, and Tim Walz, who's a Democrat, both from Minnesota, on, I think it's wind energy, solar, and I think we should do more with geothermal, et cetera. We should really expand all the options. I mean, we really should. And I think nuclear energy has to be a key component. Now, that was not a part of the House bill, but you mentioned that did pass in the House. and it barely passed. I mean, it had strong bipartisan opposition, it had some bipartisan support, but it didn't pass. And in the Senate, it's kind of stalled out. Right now, they're looking more at renewables, having a certain percentage of renewable energy by certain years, for instance, and having that dedication. And so I'm interested in looking at that, more or less, and I think you're probably going to see some more bipartisan effort around there. And we should talk more, too, after, if you've had any other ideas over the last year since we've talked last about
So do you support a tax on carbon emissions?
Oh, the tax on carbon. Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really not a fan of adding a tax on carbon or a tax on provisions like that are going to impact economic growth at a time when jobs are really key. I mean, the number one issue I hear about is jobs, jobs, jobs.
Congressman Paulsen, my name is He. I'm a small business owner from Minnetonka. First of all, I'd like to thank you for deciding to hold these forums. And I'm glad you're going to keep the tradition of your predecessors alive. Secondly, I applaud you for your support of small business. But what is happening in reality, in the previous administration and this administration, most of the bailout, most of the stimulus seems to be going to the large corporations again. When this recession is over, if it's over, fewer people and fewer corporations are going to want more of America. I'm a small contractor, general contractor. Since October 2007, all of a sudden the banks won't give me money to go do a project. So I'm laying people off like that gentleman sitting there. I can't do the project. So what's going to happen goes to a few big contractors, even though my price would be half. Now, I applaud your support for small business, but where is the beef? What are you or the Democrats doing to really support us? Like, for example, during the New Deal and President Roosevelt, they said, okay, corporations will give you this, go create jobs. The government doesn't have to do it, but the government can give me some support to go do it as an independent small business person, and that's what free enterprise capitalism is about. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. And in fact, thank you for that. I should take some time to talk with you after, too. Maybe we can come out and tour your company or interact and see firsthand what you do. But absolutely. In fact, we just had a press conference last week to talk about doing some other small business initiatives. Things like expensing of equipment and deductions and relief from mandates that would open up access to credit, for instance. I mean, that's one of the top issues I hear about from small business as well, is just having that access to credit. And a lot of small community banks in particular are very concerned about the new regulatory reform bill that went through recently, because they're going to get put on, added with a mountain of regulations, and that's going to require more compliance costs, essentially, and some speculate that's going to really impact the smaller communities and the bankers a lot more than the large companies. And so Washington has definitely had a tendency to favor the too big to fail mentality, if you will, and increase moral hazard or not do anything to take away from moral hazard. And that's where all the taxpayer bailouts have gone. I think it's just time to end the bailouts. I mean, that's my perspective. And we didn't do anything. We did nothing. We did nothing to address the bailouts that continue today, that are the key part of subprime lending and risky behavior. And so those are continuing to go on and on with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and the subprime lending markets. That is continuing. And I think that needs to be tackled and should have been tackled as a part of the overall financial regulatory reform bill. And I should get some other ideas personally from you. We've had several visits with the local chambers of commerce, for instance. There's some things you can do on trade and things, but the reality is that helps larger companies too, but small businesses can benefit in some capacity. But the reality is that 7 of every 10 jobs comes from small business. Historically, it's come from small business. It's been the engine of economic growth in our country for a long period of time. And I want to make sure that those tax rates we talked about earlier are not going to hit the so-called wealthy, because half the folks that are paying that are small businesses. And so it's pass-through income, and you're going to be paying a higher tax and hiring less people.
Congressman, may I suggest that you take shorter time to answer the questions, because there's so many questions.
And shorter questions.
And we're really getting down to time.
Keep going.
Mine will be a short question. Has any thought been going into doing I want to use the word 2010 contract for America, so we have some objectives rather than trying to solve everything?
Well, I think from the perspective of what you're seeing right now in Congress in general, Democrats and Republicans are trying to sort of lay out an agenda for what they want to see go after this next Congress. From the Republican standpoint, I will tell you that I think I'm in listening mode. So I don't think all the answers come from Washington. I really think they are going to come from out here. It's the small business owner. It's the person that we hear from in the school, et cetera. It's, you know, the 65 classrooms and schools I visited. I mean, when I talk to teachers, you know, what they're concerned about, no child left behind, et cetera. So there is going to be a rollout from the Republican side, I would say sometime in mid to late September. You know, in terms of just setting out an agenda or campaign theme, I think the Democrats are going to do the exact same thing. And I think it's really important to, sort of, to look to the future in that. So watch for that, it's going to come forward. And if you have any ideas on what should be components of agenda items, share those too. Absolutely, we'll keep it moving. You can jump around a bit. Sorry.
Yeah, my name's Don Convey from Bloomington. I'd like you to explain to me your reasoning for voting no on the 9/11 responders.
Yeah. Well, the 9/11 responders bill, that was actually last week. And so basically it's $7 billion has already been spent from the 9/11 Commission Fund that was set up years ago. And there's still money in the fund, actually. So last week a bill came forward to provide a new entitlement program for health benefits for certain private certain contractors, et cetera, dealing with 9/11. Another $7 billion, which I just thought was too much. I mean, it's going to break the bank. And so we got money in the fund. The president opposed it. President Obama said it was the wrong approach. The administrator of the existing fund, Ken Feinberg, I believe is his name, opposed it, said it was the wrong approach. And so it should be a plan that is reasonable and balanced and responsible. And hopefully there'll be some bipartisan support that'll bring that forward to the Senate. Because the vote last week was kind of more about politics, and the authors kind of, you know, generated a lot of that. And so hopefully it'll come back in a better form. Well, I have to look at the form that it's in. Yeah. Hopefully it will.
Nobody's going to
In a
get
better
there.
form.
How about those of us
All
in the
due
back?
respect, Congressman, we're hearing an awful lot of hypocrisy regarding the deficit. Most of the economists, including the Bush previous economists, have said that continuing the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy is the wrong thing to do. It would extend the deficit. You are, as you stated, for extending the Bush tax cuts, even though it adds to the deficit. Yet you voted against extending unemployment because, as you stated, it adds to the deficit. Can you explain your inconsistency?
Yeah, well, I voted for Actually, I voted for unemployment extension when it was paid for, and the president thought it should be paid for. The last version that was in last fall as well as in April. In April, I believe we had voted on that. And then the last version that went through was $34 billion unpaid for. And I think in a $3 trillion budget, you can find out how to pay for that, and it should be paid for. On the tax side, I mean, I don't want to rehash it, but I think the worst thing you can do in a tough economy is raise taxes on small business. Big mistake. So if we got 10% unemployment,
Hi, I'm Erick from Plymouth, and I'd like you to know, I know you can save $11 billion in the current budget. 11 billion, right. Currently, we just installed 11 anti-ballistic missiles in Fort Greely, Alaska. None of them are operational. Turns out that the whole program is very questionable. There was a GRW employee that blew the whistle on the thing, and so it basically is a system that doesn't work, and we're spending our hard-earned tax dollars on it. Could you explain, would you be in favor of essentially defunding that system, save $11 billion?
I should get the details from you and see what you can offer. Look at it.
Hi, I'm Jane Levin, 17-year resident of Edina, and you ran as a moderate. And we elected you as a moderate, and our district and our congressional district wanted a moderate, but your behavior suggests otherwise. And I'm going to just mention 3 things, and I'd like you to address them specifically. And I'm going to read so I don't get it wrong. You were an honorary host at the recent Sarah Palin fundraiser for Michelle Bachmann. Number two, you recently accepted an $8,500 donation from Minnesota Forward, an organization that funds right-wing Republicans. Number 3, you voted against expanding the current hate crimes law to include protecting women, people with disabilities, and gay and lesbian people. Can you respond to these, please?
Yeah, well, first of all, in terms of the moderate position, I mean, I vote what's right for the district, how I feel it's right, based on constituent feedback, et cetera. And so, I voted with the president a third of the time. So I think the president's right, I'll vote with him, all right, on his policies. If he's not, I won't vote for him. 75%, 80% of all the bills I sponsor are bipartisan. That's the only way I understand building relationships, you're going to be able to get stuff done. So from my perspective, I just think it's most important to be solution-oriented. I don't think it's important to have party labels on conservative and moderates.
Just respond to these 3 points, not the bipartisan.
Well, I mean, the characterization that you offer of the group funding right-wing, I mean, that's, you know,
were you an honorary
politics host?
Were you an honorary host at the Michelle Bachmann fundraiser? Well, yes or no? It's simple.
Well, you're asking a question where you know the answer. The state party, of course, had all the office holders.
Well, maybe I got it wrong, so I'm asking you, because it's...
Well, I don't think you got that part wrong.
I didn't get it wrong.
You were there.
Did you vote against the hate crimes bill?
Yeah, I did vote against the hate crimes bill.
Thank you.
Right. And I think the judges should have the ability to leverage penalties on people based on the situation, which is provided for. I'm sorry.
Congressman Dave Nelson from Bloomington, Minnesota. I'm a retired Army officer. And I'm looking at Congress these days. You got Maxine Waters, Charlie Rangel, who are up on ethics charges. And I want to be sure that you're going to vote to punish them severely, not just give them a slap on the wrist. Pelosi promised most transparent Congress, and she's going to drain the swamp. She's done either. But the other issue I'd like to address is term limits. We have people who are in this House and the Senate as lifelong careers. That was never the intent of the Constitution of this country. I wonder if you will fight for a constitutional amendment for term limits on congressmen.
Well, thank you for that. First of all, on the ethics issue, absolutely. I mean, and these are serious charges that were brought forward. In fact, it just got revealed last week on the Maxine Waters issue, where there apparently were some issues where her husband owns ownership in a bank, and now she asked Secretary Paulsen for bail funds or something like that to provide money to the bank to keep it going. And apparently the ethics committee, has been looking into this for a while, and now has revealed they're going to go forward with the trial that will take place come the fall. And I think absolutely these types of situations of non-transparency and arrogance and et cetera should be punished appropriately. And she's like number 3 person from chairing the Financial Services Committee. And then you have Charlie Rangel, who has been around in Congress for a long time, and he's chairing the Tax Committee and is under investigation now and may go into a trial as well after September for basically non-disclosing issues on rental income and all kinds of things that are involved with tax issues on the committee that he chairs. Now, he was removed as chair of his committee, and actually Republicans pushed hard, and I support it, to look into that with bipartisan support. Finally, the speaker relented, and I'm not sure what's going to happen when we get back in September. On the term limits issue, I wrestle with this, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of these folks have been there since I was in elementary school. Right? I mean, a long time. And I think that takes away from the whole concept of a citizen legislature. I do hope that people are smart enough and are aware enough to vote on their members accordingly, right? I think that's really, really important. But I get asked more and more questions about term limits, just like it was in the mid-1990s, for instance. More people are asking about that at Rotary meetings, Chamber of Commerce meetings, because of the frustration they have with Washington right now. So I think we're going to see that trend. It will be very difficult to pass, because you not only have to pass it with a supermajority in Congress, but you also have to get 2/3 of the states to ratify it from a constitutional perspective. So it's a really high hurdle to move forward. So I'm willing to look at it. But realistically, I think we have to clean up the ethics messes first.
Hello, my name is Jules Goldstein. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I will say that I did try and get the answer to my question to go into your campaign website to find out where you stood on the issues. And this is what I found. A blank page. Obviously, according to your campaign website, you don't have a stand on any issues. I'm hoping that that's a mistake. But my question is, I do know that you have come out being strong in favor of homeland defense. Yet you voted against the defense authorization bill, and how do you reconcile those two things? Because it seems if we don't pay for defense, we can't have a strong defense.
Say one more time. Voted against the defense authorization bill?
That's what I saw.
Okay, and I'll be honest, my memory's a little foggy in that because he was just saying a little while ago I voted for every single defense bill or authorization that came up. So I may, before I comment, I better sure look at the record then just to make sure, because there's a total disconnect here. He's nodding his head yes, so you may be wrong. And then on the website issue, obviously we'll upgrade the website on the campaign side, but the congressional website, go to it anytime. We want a golden mouse award for all the activity and the interactivity that we put on the website for constituent feedback and contact and input, which has been very, very helpful. So we're going to, the bar standard has been set high, and then we'll keep doing that. So don't think we always have to be in campaign mode, but we can be actually in official office mode, which is what we're serving people as. Someone's giving me a signal. We got
Hey,
more, so go ahead.
This is Jeff Thompson and Erick, and Team Erick for the last 16 years. One of the problems that I see in Washington that predates your term is that we're seeing bills that are 300 pages, 3,000 pages in length that were written by lobbyists predominantly, and I think not only that, they're not even being read by most of the folks in Congress, even if you could. I mean, I've tried to read some of these bills, and I know they reference other parts of the code, and it's virtually impossible to read them. They're so convoluted. And of course, they have subjects that are not related to the title of the bill. Would you support an act that's currently in Congress called the Read Bills Act that would require every member of Congress to actually read what it is they're voting for? Additionally, there's another bill that goes in tandem with that called the One Subject at a Time, which would necessitate that any bill going through Congress addresses a single subject that is related to the actual subject title of the bill instead of something completely unrelated. And finally, write the laws. Would you actually support a bill that requires that you write the laws as a congressman and not allow lobbyists to write the bills for you?
Great question. And he's signaling we're going to have to stop, and I'm going to stick around, so don't anyone run off. Don't think you can run off. But let me just answer that. It's a great question, because when the healthcare debate was going on last year, if you remember, in August in particular with the town hall meetings, that's where folks were really packing the town halls. We had one with 700 people that showed up, and just sort of anger and outrage over provisions that are put in bills that members of Congress never get to see. And I'll never forget, 1 year and a half ago, I was in my little 8x8 room that I live in out in Washington with a bunk bed in there with 3 other members, and I got an email at almost midnight. It was an email on my BlackBerry that said, we'll be voting on the $787 billion stimulus bill tomorrow. Here's a link to the bill. Well, that's ridiculous on its face. We have a 2,300-page bill or whatever, a 2,000-page bill at that time. We couldn't get a physical copy of the bill until 3 days after we voted on it. And we were sharing copies on the floor, which is just ridiculous. And it's no wonder you saw hand-printed amendments and versions that were tucked in there that were exposed later, and the hypocrisy that the media showed existed with some members. And there was egg on their face. But you know what? It got signed into law, which is wrong. And you should have 72 hours. In fact, I signed a discharge petition to change the process. Because a lot of people say process doesn't matter. It's inside baseball. I think process is very important. I really do. And I'll tell you, after seeing these large bills go through, 2,700-page health care bill, 2,300-page regulatory reform bill, stimulus bill, almost $1 trillion when you include the debt, cap and trade energy bill, where you got a 400-page amendment at 3 in the morning. And then I guarantee you that financial reform bill that passed, there may have been 2 members of Congress that read that. No one else read that. And when they do the bills, it's different than the Minnesota legislature. The Minnesota legislature always included in their bills the old language that was being crossed out. So you could follow along what was being changed and adjusted, even if you're on that committee. In Congress, you can't do that. They only show you the new language. So, and that's why you can't follow what's going on. And so there's no redlining, and it's no wonder that there's anxiety or frustration in the process. And I think process is just as important. So I support the public's right to know what a bill is. I support members of Congress knowing what's in the bill before you vote on it, let alone our staff. They have hopefully a chance to pool their resources and get together with others. It is just critical. And it's part of the whole, I think, frustration people have in Washington. I think it is really important. And when I worked at Target Corporation, I learned about good management, good decision-making, good planning. Those are not principles that are exercised in Congress right now, and it's very frustrating. So those of you that have expressed outrage or anger over that have every right, I think, to do so, and I hope you'll stay engaged over the next couple of months and beyond on what you think some changes should be, whether it might be term limits, whether it might be the process, or whether it might be tax provisions. I know there are advocates for raising taxes, etc. But I really think the bottom line is I want to focus on being solution-oriented for job creation, controlling spending, and managing the debt. Because I think, again, of my 4 kids and your grandkids, and usually I ask the question, to a group, how many of you think that your children will have a better future or more opportunities and choices than your generation had? And there are less and less hands going up.
Because of climate
And that's what we really have to change. So thanks for coming out. I'm getting a signal, so I'm going to stick around here. We'll walk around, but thank you for coming tonight, and please do stay in touch. I really appreciate the feedback, the input, the advice, even when we don't agree, and I'll listen. Thanks very much.
The meeting?
Well, questionable.
Ma'am?
Yes.
What did you think of the meeting?
I thought he did a lot of politicking, didn't answer the questions, very straightforward, and refused to explain his inconsistencies regarding spending and the deficit.
On tax cuts.
Sir, what did you think of the meeting?
What they did is they proposed that you'd have a tax cut of that. What they do is limit the tax cut to $250,000, and that what they do is they cap the inheritance tax at $3.5 million, up to $7 million. And then the question is how are they going to get to where?
Sir, what did you think of the meeting?
I think he covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. I think the issues, full issues, weren't really covered at length, and I'd like to see the question period expanded, because I think some of the questions were great, and some of them required a longer answer. Short answer would be good, followed by a longer answer, and I had an issue for him based on a letter that I got from a sheriff friend of mine, and I gave him a CD of an audit that I wanted to question him on, but he said he didn't remember sending the letter out to the sheriff or a couple other people, so I didn't want to embarrass him about the USDA audit as far as their inability to regulate the cruelty that goes on in puppy and kitten mills. Okay. Moral issue that I think a lot of these issues are moral, and they should be covered from a moral standpoint rather than a party political gamesmanship.
He's out talking to a reporter. He's talking.
Okay.
Let him finish that up, then you come over and say hi.
I don't know if we're scared of this. It would have been.
John Paul, do you have something to say for us?
I don't. I'll speak on the record. So no.
Even though.
What did you think of the meeting?
I enjoyed the meeting. I enjoyed the criticism. I think they called him on a lot of the issues, and I think he ducked a lot of the answers.
The meeting? You're Jay, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he's decided to hold these forums because they're so important to communicate with ordinary people. And as a small business person and also a volunteer citizen advocate, I have so many things to tell members of Congress. That's why I always enjoyed Congressman Ramstad being so open to everybody and trying to do his best to represent his constituency. And of course, this 3rd district is a very, very broad district, and people are mostly moderate, a lot of independents, and a lot of Democrats have supported Congressman Paulsen to get elected. So I think it's so important, and I'm glad he's doing it, and I'm glad I came.
Try to come to as many as I can. I think he's a good representative.
Okay. What did you think of the meeting?
What did I think? I thought it was a lot of nonsense. I think he was asked a lot of questions and jabbered on without answering any of the questions, but I think that's typical for an event like this.
It's extremely hypocritical. You cannot talk about the deficit and not talk about the military budget. He did not address that at all. And to not talk about the richest 1 or 2% of Americans paying their fair share, that's going to add to the deficit. He did not address that honestly, so I was a little disappointed. I was happy with the one question that was asked, very specifically, the voters elected or were thinking they were electing a moderate, and what they got was someone who votes with Michelle Bachmann. That's unacceptable.
Specific disagreements.
Eleanor.
Well, it's on some of his responses.
Keep the economy going. I mean, these are. I look at this. I guess the reason I came is to hear what's going on.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I get out in the community as much as I can and talk to small businesses and talk to folks in the community, and so this is a good forum to do that and see who came out on a Monday night to take the time and take the energy to figure out what. You know, to show what they're concerned about. So that's why I'm here tonight. Now I heard a lot of redescription of problems that we know exist. We have a huge debt problem. It's been going for a long time. How do we get out of it? That's the fundamental question.
I was going to say that because there's this disconnect between there's this general not really wanting of taxes and also general dislike of massive debt. So how do you balance?
I mean, it is, and a lot of that comes from the growth of Social Security and Medicare that's coming from age population, the change in the age demographic. I mean, these are big problems, and there isn't one solution to any of them, and that's I guess when we try to make it simple and make it easy. That's a lot of my frustration with it also.
Clean energy was brought up a couple times. Yeah. I mean, would you have voted for that cap and trade bill that was in the House?
If it moves us to clean energy economy and investing in clean energy right now, I was talking to some business owners just this weekend actually about how, well, first of all, let's talk about cap and trade. Cap and trade, we had a system like that in the 80s with sulfur emissions. That the business community and the environmental community got together and sat down and figured out how to put that together. Dave Durberger put that together to get rid of sulfur emissions. It actually got rid of sulfur emissions, and it got some retooling of companies also. So it grew the economy and protected the environment at the same time. So there are ways to do this.
Higher energy prices,
it's not an either or. Well, it's not gonna happen overnight. It's an incremental thing to make sure those are taken care of. So that's the frustration. I mean, these aren't snap overnight kinds of things. These are changes that take place over time that we can build into it and modify and make sure they don't have that impact. But I mean, that's my frustration with, are we going to do this either or right now? Well, we've learned that we can do systems that clear the air, clear the water, that do grow the economy at the same time. We can get back to that.
So would you have voted for that bill?
The clean energy bill?
Yeah.
As it stands, yeah, I would have. Yeah.
Would you support a carbon tax of some sort, something like that?
Carbon tax?
They talked about.
Well, yeah, same bill.
No one said anything.
That's what we're talking about, right? I mean, cap and trade. The cap and trade bill was a carbon tax.
I guess a more direct carbon tax.
What?
I guess a more direct carbon tax.
A more direct carbon tax?
I'm just saying, what level?
You can't just take things off the table with the presumption that they're going to kill jobs is the point. You can't start at point D in the discussion as though, certain options have already been eliminated.
Yeah.
As far as healthcare, would you have voted for that?
As a start to fixing a system that we've been trying to fix for 100 years, knowing full well that it doesn't solve the problems. I mean, I agree. It doesn't cut costs. That's something that we really have to come to grips with. Is we are paying a lot for care. There's enough money in the system right now to take care of everybody. That crushes our competitiveness in the world. When we talk about other countries and exporting jobs, one of the biggest reasons is because they have different systems for caring for their people that don't add as much cost to the system. That's why we have a lot of auto plants in Canada, Mexico, and other countries. They have lower costs. That's why we're trying to fix the system. That's why we're trying to lower costs, is to actually help lower costs for businesses long term. Now, it doesn't get done overnight. That's the other part that really frustrates me. I mean, we've been doing this for 100 years, trying to fix the healthcare system. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a structure that's in place. So there's a structure that, it gets people to the right place at the right time. It gets, it expands access. But we've got to make sure that we're containing costs also. Expanding access is part of that. Making sure that, we're paying $1,000 out of our premiums right now, every year, to cover uncompensated care. It's a cost shift from us. The reality is the cost for healthcare, for premiums to employers in this country have doubled over the last 9 years. They've tripled. The impact to each of us individually have tripled over the last 9 years. That's a real cost to business and to individuals that we're trying to get a handle on. Thank heavens we've got something to start to try and figure out how to fix that system. There's a lot more work that's got to get done with it, though. A lot more work. I tell you, just throwing out medical malpractice reform isn't a solution to that either. That's another one of those,
So far, there hasn't been any real discussion of what they're going to do to bring down that systemic delivery.
It's going to take a long time to do it. I mean, we've got to have payment reform in the system.
But you think the bill is still effective?
It's a start. Yeah, it's a start. It's not perfect. Nobody would tell you that. I mean, they have lower costs. They have lower per individual costs for healthcare services. I mean, the countries do subsidize them to some degree. So, and it hurts our competitiveness. I mean, it adds cost to our manufacturing here and our production. So yeah, that's one of the reasons we're going to fix it.
Did you?
This environment. I mean, it's boy. Go knock on the doors with me for a little bit. I tell you, there's harsh questions for everybody right now, and there's no easy answer. That's the other thing. There's a lot of tough questions, and really no. Hopefully soon. We're gonna have them soon.
We were just invited to one the other day, actually. It's in Brooklyn Park. So I think
would you have supported legislation on the medical device tax that was passed through Congress 2 weeks ago?
This is one area where the congressman and I agree. The medical device tax. I worked for an organization that did a lot with the FDA, and I understand how that process has got to be streamlined. So that's something where he and I would agree on, actually do, and I've talked a lot to the medical device community about those same issues and streamlining the FDA process. Part of it is getting some folks in place, with the regulatory structure, so there's some consistency also in how that process takes place. So there's a lot of things that have to be done there, but yeah, it's definitely that's a long time.
Should we go?
Yeah, good.
Thanks.
It's a beautiful night. The sunset's going.
Oh no, come on, no. Seriously.
Oh, I'm looking forward to having a good discussion on a lot of these issues with the congressman. We're going to have a good, healthy disagreement on a lot of stuff, and I'm looking forward to that.
Very calling.
Yep.
He's actually going down there. That is just insane. And in one of those buildings, I think it's a healthcare bill, there's something on gold. Now there's a limit on how much gold you can buy. And also,
I'll check.
I think that anything Congress and Senate are irrelevant anymore. He does what he wants to. He's a dictator. We lost.
Well, stay engaged.
You may not even know where it is, but yes.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, keep in touch.
Okay, let me.
I enjoyed your
I hate getting in those things.
I was just telling this young lady that
It does tend to keep the spontaneity out of it.
We got 2 cameras on record. I mean, that's something to chew on him with 2 on
I see a lot of the in-war
and then when
stickers on.
you're asking your questions, you're like, all right.
That intrigues me because some people
very objective way.
peaceable themselves.
Right.
And I wanted to make a comment to the gentleman
the world
that was here about the global warming.
Yeah.
I find that intriguing because I didn't hear him say a thing about the Gulf oil spill. And I'm from the Gulf, and she tells me you're going down there trying to...
No, but...